Good afternoon.
I think this is because Aisha, you have two microphones like close together. I think you have to turn one of them off.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I think we are waiting for the chair. Once she's available, then we can commence. Okay, I think the audio issue is coming from Aisha Bauer. So I've rectified it, so I think it's better now. Can you hear me, Paul?
Yeah, I can hear you. I think Aisha can hear you too, but she's muted. She just has to unmute one of the one where you can see her, I think. Yeah.
Yeah. I'll do that.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. I think.
Are we starting the presentation?
Ma, please, can you switch one of your device? Like maybe you have
Which
two
of the device? Okay,
like,
I have two. It's like.
Please switch off one. Or mute one of them.
It's okay.
Yeah, I think it's better now.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. LSA, for giving me the opportunity to be part of this panel. Hello? Are you getting me?
Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, now. It is my privilege to have been invited to this panel discussion on the book titled From Rebels to Rulers, Writing Legitimacy in the Early Sokoto State, which is authored by Paul Naylor. I have the privilege of going through the book to some extent. And I can say that the book is a fresh insight that contributed into the existing literature on the studies of the largest political structure in Africa prior to the colonial invasion, that is the Sokoto Caliphate. Even though the author tried to avoid the use of the Caliphate, and in which he preferred to use the term Sokoto State, the book is on the political history of the state, which is the Sokoto, popularly known as the Caliphate, which was founded around 1807 by the Sultan Muhammad Bello. The book presents the nature of the pre-state politics. Particularly, it highlighted the Hausa kingship known as Sarakuna and their political claim of authority, as well as the impact of the caliphate on the powerful empires of Borno and that of Oyo Empire. The book From Rebels to Rulers illuminates the long history of engagement with the Arabic writings of the Fodiawa. I think the author decided to use the word Fodiawa, referring to the three prominent scholars of the Caliphate, Sheikh Usman bin Fodio, Abdullah Fodio, and Muhammad Bello as Fodiawa. So that is the term that the author used, which is also new compared to other literatures available on the Sokoto Caliphate. The book identified the importance also of the institution of slavery and slave trade in knowledge production. That is through the importation of paper, which was used in the writing of their manuscript. As pointed out by the author, possibly must have been produced from Italy or France, but using the Trans-Saharan means of transaction and communication, those papers appeared in the Sahel. The book also, within this context, the book established a theoretical framework on the approaches to legitimacy. The author has a differing views on the concept of legitimacy of the state. It views legitimacy as a complex and multifaceted concept, which differ it from other literatures on Sokoto Caliphate that actually look at one factor, either be it political, economic, social, or what have you, that actually led to the outbreak of the jihad, or the reasons for the jihad as pointed by other scholars. This author look at the concept of legitimacy to be a multifaceted approach. The book further highlighted the significance of the historiography, that is the writing text of these scholars, which he referred to as the Fodiawa, in which case the writings or the literatures were found across North Africa, West Africa, as well as the Western world, through particularly the activities of explorers. In particular, he made mention of the visit of Hugh Clapperton, which he did in 1824, and he met Muhammad Bello in Sokoto. So he highlighted the importance of the literature as well as the spread across these regions of the historiography. He also made mention of the problem arising from such development of that historiography, in which case he identified the issues as that of leading to questions and disagreement instead of issues of unity. He also made mention about how the intellectual scholar Muhammad Bello responded to that aspect. Through what? Through the means of writing. The book also addresses the question of whom were the Fodiawa writing for. A lot of literatures and the past scholarly works on the Sokoto Caliphate made mention of their writings in which volumes of their works were being presented in volumes, in numbers, from 67 of Abdullah Fodio to 100 of Usman and Fodio. So this author in this book tried to make mention of or try to address the question of their writings, to particularly on who they are writing on, in which he made mention of the correspondence of Muhammad Bello, Usman Danfodio, and Abdullah Ngondu, citing examples like the Tathir al-Ikhwan, that is the warning to the brother. This actually explains the correspondence to which that literature was made for. Then there is also Diya al-Hukam, the guidance for the judges by Abdullahi Fodio. To an extent, I can say the book is insightful. The book is a contribution to knowledge. The book is a contribution to the existing literature on the Sokoto Caliphate with divergent views. However, my observation with regard to the limitations of the author in the book is that, first, the book dwells much on the question of legitimacy. That is, in the course of interrogation, it relied heavily on the account of Europeans, or I can say explorers, who have limited knowledge of what legitimate may be or what legitimizes a ruler in the Islamic context. Secondly, the author referring to the Fodiawa as rebels has not been clearly stated or clarified in the writing. I have gone through Though to some extent, I have not seen where the author made mention of what these rebels stand for. In what context is the author referring to the jihadis as rebels? And if that is the case, I can say that for mere mentioning them as local band of rebels who rose to power between 1804 and 1837 is a sleepy statement without justification. These are my observations. Congratulations to Paul. Thank you.
Thank you, Aisha. Okay. We don't have a chair, so I don't know what happens now.
You don't, so to share, you mean my screen?
No, we don't have a chair, I said. Dr. Fanny is not.
I think it happens last year. What will happen is we continue with our presentations.
Exactly.
And we make questions, I think.
Yeah, Aisha, Dr. Bauer, you seem like a good chair, I think. You should be the chair.
So let's listen to.
Definitely. She should chair.
Dr. Mutiyat Oladejo. Dr. Mutiyat, continue.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I'm delighted to be speaking to your work, Paul Naylor. Am I correct with the pronunciation, Naylor?
Yes, that's correct. Thank you.
Thank you. So when I saw your title, From Rebels to Rulers, Writing Legitimacy in Early Sokoto State, I was just trying to think that what exactly are you going to be coming up with? But then when I saw writing legitimacy, you know, while we were younger, when we attended the usual madrasa as Muslims, during my university days, I borrowed some courses in Islamic studies. So I tend to know so much about the textual studies of Quran Hadith, scholars, Sirah, you know, it's something we were used to while we were growing up. So when I began to read your book, a lot of things came to my mind about what we grew up with, the legacies we were taught while we were growing up. And so I find it interesting. It was readable to me. I resonated with it. So thank you for the work. Now, the book contains 4 chapters apart from the introduction and conclusion. And my reading of the book, I'll be reading it around 3 themes: state building, knowledge, and politics. That's the way I read it. The book, the author chose to look at Sokoto and not as Sokoto Caliphate. And I tried to understand him along that line to see why he was trying to deconstruct and probably reconstruct the meaning or the difference between Sokoto and Sokoto Caliphate. So quite interesting, I noted that. Then he tried to weave that around names, roles, and identities of actors involved. This also helps us to understand the fact that there are other emirates and sub-emirates in Sokoto, and in the usual history courses during undergraduate days, we know that apart from the Sokoto Caliphate, there are the Gwandu Emirate and other emirates as it is in contemporary northern Nigeria. But in his introduction, he was quick to define Sokoto as a geographically large state, emerging from self-proclaimed jihad movements of the 18th and 19th centuries. He took us through the state-building project after 1804 jihad, where Hausa kingdoms were destroyed, Sifawa dynasty, and by extension, it also triggered the chaos in Old Oyo Empire. The major actors in the conflict championed a new centralized state that reformed and transformed through the 19th century. The state-building project placed more emphasis on knowledge production, as Bello was prolific in Arabic, and he was a reciter and writer. The resolved issues of contestations through Arabic language assault between 1804 and 1837, Mohamed Bello produced a large body of text. However, Naylor notes that in spite of the impressive features of the jihad, there were opposition and disintegration, because one would have thought that jihad by intention was supposed to create a centralized state from probably less centralized states. But then, despite the centrality of what Sokoto, the jihad, was aimed at, it created some opposition and disintegration. So in the context of this book, he termed the rebels as a lot to deal with as they try to reframe and re-strategize to become relevant as rulers, as they were the main actors in the jihad, to destroy the old regimes and replace it with the new ones. The author placed emphasis on the Fodiawa's legacy as an interface between knowledge and politics. Naylor placed emphasis on how Sokoto writings was an important factor in statecraft and nationalism, as there could be a whole academic unit for Sokoto studies in Nigeria. And I think there is something like that in Udus, Usman Dan Fodio University, as I think I'm aware that there are several studies that have been produced on Sokoto in Nigeria. Invariably, he emphasized the role of Arabic text in nation building. Naylor's reference to the 1922 Edward J. Arnett's translation of Bello's Infaq al-Mysore gives insight to the reason why Britain introduced indirect rule in Nigeria. The strength of state building was profound in the records available from Fodiawa files, and thus influenced Nigeria's political history, such that the post-colonial political groupings was almost centered around the legacies from Sokoto. The Northern History Research Scheme was funded to produce more knowledge and weave out the writings that transformed Hausa society in that 1804 jihad, manifested subsequently even in the post-colonial states in Nigeria. The texts, the Fodiawa files I mean here, became tools of political legitimation in the way of generations of northern politicians that partake in Nigerian politics. You know, it became something that even till contemporary times, it influences the mindset and thinking around how Islam manifests in politics and governance. Naylor weaved the Arabic sources and documentations with social and political beliefs prevalent in the 19th century, and of course linked it to knowledge traditions in North Africa of the 15th and 16th century. Specifically, I find the analysis of Kashf, Nosab, Fiqh expository to understand the knowledge traditions guiding Sokoto. They were invoked for legitimacy and authority in the Maliki texts for pedagogy, while they adhered to the Qadariya sect. The book explicates on how writing was a source of power used by Usman Dan Fodio and his younger brother Abdullahi. And they also use this as text of preaching to produce in volumes. For instance, the Iya al-Sunnah wa Ikmad al-Bidha, revival of Sunnah and the destruction of innovation. Thus, the aim of the text was to teach rural Muslim Hausa communities better ways of doing Islam. So what I see in what Naylor tried to project from this is the fact that right from governance at the top till the out conduct of everyday life in the rural communities, the text was aimed at using the Sirah, all the knowledge systems that had gone through Islamic histories, and remake and regurgitate it into the society and form a new society based on Islamic principles. To introduce the rural Muslim Hausa communities to better ways of doing Islam according to the kind of ideologies they had then. Now, in conclusion, and based on my own conclusion of the reading, the explanations emphasized how Fodiawa texts remain relevant in the scholarship of the Sahel That is not disputable. The knowledge on the Fodiawa text enhance state formation and legitimacy even beyond Sokoto, as we can see, even in contemporary northern and West Africa. Naylor established changes and continuity in the intellectual traditions that are used to sustain political power. I mean, even in the post-colonial era. Ultimately, the book explains how ideological issues have delegitimized the Fodiawa, and that's about the contemporary times. There are ideological issues bedeviling the northern part of the country in contemporary times, which sort of delegitimize what the Fodiawa preached more than 200 years ago. For instance, the position of Boko Haram that their jihad is similar to 1804 jihad, but then this has created a kind of disruption in the society. But in spite of that disruption, it is important to note that the Fodiawa still has its legitimacy, even in contemporary times, because even Muslims in Europe that are of West African origin continue to draw strength from the Fodiawa legacies. And within Nigeria, contemporary modern Muslims continue to draw inspirations that guide their everyday Muslim life from this text. So on this note, I appreciate the work of the author. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Oh, Dr. Bao, I think you're muted. Thank you, Mutiat. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Aisha, you're muted. Dr. Bao.
Hello?
Yes, perfect.
I want to call on the next panelist. That is in person of Dr. Abdulbasit Kasim. If he is on, he should take his presentation. He's joining us via Zoom. Thank you.
Hello. Good morning. Good morning, everyone.
It's morning there where you are.
Yeah, you betrayed your location, Abdulbasit. You're not in Nigeria.
You are not Nigeria. That is why you are saying morning.
Yes. Good morning.
So let's continue. Morning.
Yes. So it's I'm actually joining you. I'm currently at Northwestern University. And I would love to first start with a note of congratulations to Dr. Naylor for coming up with this book project. So I know that this particular book is the revised version of your dissertation. Well, I remember when I think sometimes in 2019 when you were trying to put this this manuscript together to submit to James Currey for submission. And I remember then before the pandemic, I think we had like a section together with Sean and Wendell. So this book has been, it's been a long time coming. So it's good to finally have it in a published form. So on that basis, I congratulate you for the book. There are many things to talk about this book, but I will just briefly try to summarize by looking at where your book fall in the historiography of the Sokoto tradition, the study of the Caliphate studies, or what you call Sokoto studies in your book. So when we look at the attempt to understand the Caliphate, I mean, the Sokoto Caliphate, even though you dislike the term Caliphate, and we will last argue that, we should keep using the term Sokoto Caliphate. The attempt to understand the jihad movement, particularly from their primary sources, from the materials, as taking different dimensions and different frameworks. So we have, for example, the writings of the travel literatures of European explorers, the likes of Enrich Barthes, the Ham-Dixon, Clapperton, and others. We also have the missionaries as well. Well, I was surprised you never made any mention of them in your book. But the missionary they also attempted as well to make use of these Arabic sources in understanding or delegitimizing the the leaders of the jihad movement as in their attempt to in northern Nigeria. So we have the works of people like Charles M. Robinson, William Kalkum of the Sudan United Mission, as well as Walter Samuel Richard Miller of the Church Missionary Society. I mean, all of these missionaries have also used the Arabic sources as well. And then from the missionary historiography, we have the Colonial Service Scholarship. So the Colonial Service Scholarship, I mean, this include the works of anthropologists and administrators like John Alder Bolden, Edward John Arnett, whom you cited in your work, Albert Richmond Palmer, Sidney Ogben, which you cited in your work as well as Charles Edward Jewell Whithin, Anthony Stevens. All of these scholars were all writing during the colonial period, and they also in their literature, they also made attempt to engage the Arabic sources and the Arabic source materials in understanding the jihad movement. And then from the colonial service scholarship, we then get to the scholarship of the European and American scholars. These European American scholars, they were the ones that pioneered the history department in most African universities. So we have the likes of H.F.C. Smith, Abdullah Smith, Murray Last, I mean, he did his PhD on that, H.F.C. Smith, W.E.N. Kensdale, who worked on the manuscript at the University of the Arabic library collection at the University of Ibadan. And then we have the likes of Ulrich Robstock, Isket, Jim Boyd, Paul Lovejoy. All of the scholars, they all fall into that fold of European and American scholars who contributed to the historiography of the Caliphate of the jihad movement. And then we have the Africanist academic historiography. So in the Africanist academic historiography, this is where we have the works of people like Fatih El-Misri, Professor Hamza Mishanu, M.A. Al-Hajj, who wrote about the Mahdist tradition, Sambo Wali Junaid, who wrote about the Arabic poetry tradition of the Sokoto, Shehu Galadanchi, Professor Shehu Galadanchi, and others who fall into this category. And then we have the geographical apologetic literature about the Caliphate, and this is where you put the likes of Malam Ibrahim Suleiman, who has written about the African Caliphate. I think Dr. Usman Bugaji as well will fall into this category. And then we have the Middle Belt Islam critical historiography as well. This is where you have the likes of Yusuf Turaki, Joseph Kenney to an extent. Well, Joseph Kenney, maybe not, but then Yusuf Turaki, Matthew Asen Kuka, perhaps maybe Professor Chon's work can also fall into that as well. So these are Middle Belt, like Islam critical literature. So there have been different attempts to look at the source materials, but I think what you force us to do in your book is you're not making us to take a step back and say, wait, the way people have approached this text, the Arabic source materials of the Caliphate, they approach this text as facts rather than looking at this text as legitimizing devices that the foreigners of the jihad movement used to appropriate legitimacy for themselves. And then in explaining this legitimacy, I mean, you define your legitimacy around the theme of fiqh, kashf, and nasr. And these three core elements of legitimacy, you tied it to the core curriculum, which you call the Sahelian discursive tradition. And then you went further to discuss some of the themes in the literature of the 40-hour, or you came up with the theme of the discourse of dissent, and how the discourse of dissent, how it gradually shifted to the discourse of moderation. You touched on slavery, you touched on Tawheed and Ilm al-Kalam, you touched on Al-Wala al-Bara, Iman and Kufr, Ahkam al-Diyar, which is the old debate around territoriality, Imama, Ahkam al-Sultaniya, and different other issues around Islamic political thought. But I think while reading your work as well, so I think I'll just briefly mention two important themes that I think it's important for us to think about, not just your book, but also place Mauro Nobile's book as well in this same category, as well as the current research of Seiji Nakao. So there's been an attempt to understand the role that the custodians of this heritage played in their collaboration and engagement, particularly with the colonial administrators or even the European and American scholars. So, for example, in the case of the Sokoto Jihad movement, we have the person of Murray Last, his engagement with Waziri Junaid. In the case of Mauro, Tariq Fatash, we have Noor Tahir and his engagement with Delafosse and Octave Undas. In the case of Seiji Nakao, he is working on the Saurarian tradition and is looking at the connection between Ivor Weeks and the connection between Ivor Weeks and Marhaba Sanogo in the Saurarian tradition. But one key question for me when I read your work is, you made a case that this non-critical approach of looking at the Arabic source materials of the Sokoto Jihad movement, you made a case that it was pioneered by the likes of Paula Mohares, Benedita Rossi, and Mauro Nobili and others. But I was so surprised at the paucity of engagement, your paucity of engagement with the scholarship, particularly the scholarship being produced by Nigerian scholars in Nigerian universities. And what is surprising to me about this paucity, I mean, for other scholars, I might overlook, but in your case, Paul, I mean, you were actually at Northwestern University, and Northwestern University has virtually all the local journals, the journals published at Usman Dan Fodio University at BUK, including Kano Studies, Annals of Borno, Savannah, and Nahda, produced, and Nigerian scholars have also been engaging in this critical engagement with the Arabic source material. So just like Benito Rossi, just like Mauro Nobili and Paula, Nigerian scholars have also been asking questions. For example, I mean, there was a conference that took place at Uthman Dan Fodio University where one of the scholars he presented a paper about the Yendoto, Suaye or Malama Yendoto, where he spoke about the Yendoto. He asked questions. But it's also even Sheikh Ibrahim Saleh, the scholar from Sheikh Ibrahim Saleh, the Tijani scholar from Borno, who in his own book as well, particularly Historical Islam, where he looked at Khan and Borno, he also asked questions as well. So to give the I'm so sorry for using this dichotomy, but to give the European and American scholars this credit of being the scholars who are pioneering this critical approach with the Arabic source materials and overlooking the scholarship that Nigerian scholars have been producing on this same subject, asking all of these questions. I think it's not too fair, in my own opinion. I think that's one major drawback I have. So when I was looking at your citation, you cited some Nigerian scholars, including Emi El Haj and all this, but I noticed that most of the Nigerian scholars you cited, they were mostly scholars who had their PhDs at places like SOAS, for example, Umar Bello, MT Amina, and others. But what about the dissertation being published in Nigerian universities, from Ahmadu Bello University, from Udu, where some of these topics that you address in your book have also been extensively discussed? I mean, what happened to the works of these scholars? Why have their works been largely overlooked, in your book? I think that's one major feedback I have. But other than that, I thoroughly appreciate your scholarship, and I think I appreciate your engagement with the source materials itself, because there's been a lot of conversation about Arabic manuscript. There's almost like a fetishization of Arabic manuscript. I mean, Usman Khan talked about the Islamic Library of West Africa. There's always like, thousands of manuscripts, but there's been paucity of extracting knowledge from this manuscript. What exactly is in the manuscript? What can the manuscript tell us about African history? And I think this is one thing you successfully did in your book by going beyond, you know, the Ulabalu and the euphorial and fetishization of manuscript, and also going into the manuscript itself. But lastly, I also think that you know, your research is largely based on, like, you know, library research, you know, text based research, and you know, I think there's importance. It is important to, you know, add a bit of historical anthropology by actually, you know, going to even Sokoto, for example, you know, and sitting down and interviewing like some of the community historians. For example, one of the famous community historian in Sokoto is Sheikh Mohammed Issa Talata Mafara, for example. And Sheikh Talata Mafara has written a couple of books. He has translated a couple of texts from the Fodiawa. You know, scholars like that, it would be good to actually engage them, ask them questions, you know, about, okay, did the Fodiawa even use the term caliphate? I mean, some of the issues you raised in your text, I felt that it would have been good if you had traveled to probably Nigeria to interview the heirs or the custodians of the heritage and ask them questions. I think that will have also improved and enrich your work as well. But in general, I mean, it's an excellent work. It's an excellent contribution to the historiography, and I definitely look forward to you know, future, you know, publication, you know, that will arise from your current, you know, project. You know, I would love to stop here. Congratulations once again, Dr. Naylor.
Thank you, Abdulbasi, for that wonderful analysis of the book. Can we give Paul Naylor maybe some minutes to react to the observations being made by the panelists?
Yeah, sure, that sounds good. I think I got them all. So yeah, thank you all of you for your rich contributions. I really appreciate, you know, you taking the time to engage with my work. And I'm looking forward for the opportunity now to discuss a bit more some of the points that you made. So I start in order. I start with Dr. Bauer first. You mentioned about the reliance on European explorers. I think I hope that I rely on them as a source, just like I rely upon the Arabic manuscripts, just as I rely upon other sources. But I hope that I don't rely on them for my definition of legitimacy. I mean, I hope I made clear in the book that the legitimacy, this kind of tripartite division that Abdulbasit talked about, you know, is derived from the manuscripts themselves. You know, that's the idea, is that, you know, what are these manuscripts trying to tell us? Yes, they do have certain historical details we can extract to write an events-based history of Sokoto or history of reformist movements in West Africa. You know, but what they really are doing is they're showing us how legitimacy was created in these societies. And so I don't rely on the European explorers for the construction of legitimacy. That is something that is completely within this kind of meta world of Arabic texts that the Fodiawa were using. So that's my response on that. You didn't like the term rebels. I think my point was that when I said the small band of rebels, I mean that is what essentially every movement, every social movement starts small. And that's exactly what happened in Gobia with the movement of Sheikh Osman. And what I wanted to show with rebels was that this was a deliberate term, because, you know, Islam allows for, you know, various forms of political action, you know, and so you can use, in this case, Maliki law to argue for the overthrow of a government because they're not practicing Islam correctly, because they're not really Muslims, or because they collaborate with non-Muslims. You know, there's a legal framework, there's a history there that you can use to show that it's your right, even though you are a small party, to overthrow the large party in the name of Islam. This route, this kind of toolbox is available, you know, in Islam. But then this is what I call the discourse of dissent. And so the discourse of dissent, you have to be a small party, you have to be rebels in order for this argument to work. You have to say, we are the minority standing up against the corrupt majority. So this is one argument that Usman dan Fodio and the Fodio were used at the beginning of the jihad. And of course, once the jihad is won, you don't want to make that argument anymore because you are now the majority. You are now the majority trying to actually suppress rebellions against you using the same arguments from this discursive tradition. And so you have to search in this toolbox, this toolbox of fiqh, and take your own arguments about, as I talked about in the chapter 4, I think, God is on the side of the strongest party. Rebellion against a Muslim ruler, even if they be imperfect, it creates fitna, creates anarchy, and so you can take these kind of arguments as well. So in this case, you're not rebels anymore. You are now the Amir al-Mu'mineen, getting rid of the kind of illegal challenges against you. So I hope that's clarified a bit why I use that term rebels and clarified the term a bit. Okay. So, Dr. Mutian, I didn't have this much because I don't think you had any major criticisms. I just think it was a very sophisticated analysis of the book, especially the aspect of this legacy of Sokoto that is taught in Nigeria today, especially in the north. And I think what I wanted to do, and this also is applied to Dr. Kasim's point, is that I wanted to take Sokoto studies away from Nigeria to a certain extent, because I hope I can demonstrate that Sokoto was much more than Nigerian history. It also applies among a wide geographical area. And we have to remember that, Usman, Abdullahi, Mohammed Bello, they weren't Nigerians, because this concept didn't exist at the time. Their view, they were living in a Sahelian world, and where their focus point was very much to the north and to the west. They were engaging with scholars in Timbuktu, in Algeria, in Libya, and of course in other regions. But what I wanted to show is that we can take this set of writings from Muslim scholars in northern Nigeria and apply it across the whole Muslim world in the sense of what we can learn from, what insights we can get from Muslim political movements. We can use this one example and apply it, and we can say, how is legitimacy constructed within Muslim social movements? And we can apply this in many different places, and really try to get away from this straight line between caliphate, protectorate, nation state, and try to say, look, what else can we do with this, with these sources, other than tell this very linear story that's imposed upon us by future events. As historians, we can't just take the present and go back in a line to the past and we retrace that line. We have to imagine, what was the Fodiawa's worldview at the time, and that's what I tried to do in the book. So in terms of the engagement, I take your point, Dr. Kasim, about the lack of engagement with scholars in Nigeria who have been perhaps have had a more critical perspective. One reason, and it's not a good enough excuse, is that a lot of this material was just not, I was not aware of it, or is not accessible. It was not accessible, or I was not aware of it. But that's not the main reason I want to bring up. The main reason is, unfortunately, because of the way the power dynamics in the academic world, European and American scholars have had an outsized influence on the way that we see Sokoto, the way that we see Northern Nigerian history. And I would say a pretty damaging influence on it, in the sense that historians, especially in the 60s and 70s, they almost became jihadists. They used the same approach, and they just accepted as true that this jihad was to remove corruption from the House of States and to impose a society of good governance on the region, which was a perfect template then for the British colonial project of indirect rule. And so the reason I dwell on this, and the reason I dwell on the European-American response to these studies, is that it was incredibly influential on the way that Sokoto was seen in the region as well. And we see Morila's book being reprinted now, and it's used in Nigerian public schools. It's incredibly influential, and so that's why I wanted to kind of take aim and then also to find alternatives in the European American world. And so in terms of going to Sokoto, I did have the opportunity to go during my PhD. Unfortunately, I couldn't do that for various reasons, but I was following the manuscripts really, and the manuscripts that I wanted was in Niger, was in Niger Republic. So again, Sokoto is more than Nigeria. Niger Republic, Chad, Benin, Togo, Cameroon, they all have, they were all historically part of the Sokoto Caliphate, or the Sokoto state, as I call it. And so I didn't feel I had to stick with northern Nigeria. I spent several months in Niger at the National Archives there, and I spoke to various people in a more kind of anthropological way, Jibo Hamani and others, in the vein that Abdul Basit you suggested. And so really I was following the manuscripts, because this is very much a library study. It's based upon manuscripts, and the most easily accessible material was in the Niger Republic, and that's why I spent my time there. And again, this is just a reminder that this history also exists outside of Nigeria. So I think I got everything.
Thank you, Paul, for that response. As a writer to your response, I think what Dr. Abdulbasi said, there are more to that. Just last week, we had international conference in Arewa House, Kaduna, on Islamic scholarship and learning in Africa. A lot of scholars, academics were invited across Africa, and a number of papers were presented that has to do with the issue of the caliphate. So that is why he insisted that Niger, I think Niger, virtually, if I may say, you are talking about Hamani, it cannot be compared to other scholars that we have of the Sokoto Caliphate. Sokoto is the seat of where we have the knowledge production with regard to the Caliphate in different aspects. You'll be surprised to see that there are yet manuscripts that you have never seen that are yet to be translated. They are still with the Wazir Junaidu, History and Culture Bureau. So I think one of those times you can find time Nigeria is peaceful, you can still come and get a lot of manuscripts that are
I would love to. I would love to.
So I think any other team, I think this is a very good session. I want to congratulate Professor Said and LSA for having a wonderful engagement with the book, From Rebels to Rulers by Paul Naylor. So thank you very much, panelists, Dr. Mutiyat, my sister, Dr. Abdul Basit, I have been hearing through my son, Umar Yandaki.
Oh.
So, he's my son. Yes, so I've been hearing a lot about you. Thank you very much for putting my son through. I appreciate that. I'm his academic mentor, and also his father was my mentor. So that's why I took him as my adopted son.
Yes, yeah. It's so nice to finally meet you as well, Dr. Bawa. I've also been hearing about you as well, and I've also benefited from your scholarship as well. But I was thinking maybe you're going to open the Q&A for other attendees.
Do we have them? Okay. I can see.
Yeah, we have.
I'm seeing only the panelists.
Okay. So
yes, only the panelists.
There are comments in the Q&A, please.
Okay, let's check.
Let me read it out. From Semi Wadekele, he said, hello, panelists. Thank you so much for your review of the book, and to Paul for the brilliant book. Is it possible to ask some questions? This contestation between rebels and their antagonists on the issue of legitimacy, how much of this past echoes in contemporary terrorists and rebels debate? That's one. Two, the author has commented on what he did to get his dissertation done. Is it possible to shed more light on what was added to turn the dissertation to book? That's from Semil. Then we have another one from Tosin Orimolade. Hi, Dr. Paul Naylor. I would really love to read your book. I wonder if you could share with me an electronic version. And his email is there.
Let me quickly respond. Please, Dr. Muti, at any moment I cease, you can take over. My system is running down of the battery.
Oh,
and
okay.
there is no light where I am. So in case you can't find me, please you take over with the questions and answer section. Yeah. That is Nigeria for you.
Okay, very good. Okay. I don't know if the author is seeing the Q&A too.
I can see. Yes, I can see.
Yes.
So maybe you can start responding to them.
Sure. I'm happy to get the question about the electronic version of my book, because one thing that I really wanted to do was to publish From Rebels to Rulers in Nigeria. However, I managed to, I got permission from my publisher to do so. But I've been having real trouble trying to get the book published in Nigeria. So if anybody knows, it has links to Premium Times or another publisher in Nigeria, I would love to have that conversation about publishing, because it is very important for me that this book is accessible, of course, in Nigeria and in West Africa in general. But I can certainly correspond about getting an electronic version with I got the email, so I can do that. Okay, so to Samir's comment, thank you, Samir. Thank you for your comments. Thank you for your attendance. You asked me what I did to get the dissertation done. You should have come to the turn your dissertation into a book panel that we did on Tuesday, I think, at Lagos Studies Association. So there was a panel exactly on this theme, how to turn your dissertation into a book. Do we know if Lagos Studies Association is releasing these recordings online? Because if they are, Samuel, you can definitely see that that was a very good discussion we had, a kind of round table with first book authors. So hopefully you can see that. Let me see. Does anybody have any comments on the panelists about what I said so far?
No. So, Dr. Coates, Oliver Coates has a question for you.
Oh yeah, I didn't finish with the semi-use. I was just asking just before I keep talking. We're good. So Semio asks the contestation between rebels and their antagonists on the issue of legitimacy. How much of this past echoes in contemporary the terrorist rebels debate? Yeah, I mean, in the concluding chapter of my book, I tried to state how there's these cycles of legitimizing and delegitimizing that running all the time in all of our societies. And the most clearest point here is in the Sufi brotherhoods of Nigeria. So, for example, Usman was Qadiri Sufi. They were all Qadiriya, him, Abdullahi, and Bello. There's no way into the Qadiri Sufi. You can't get straight to the top. You have to join at a lower level because of the how well established this has been. And in the case, this was through the Kunta. You had to join at a lower level. So what do you do to gain more status? Well, you can join the Tijaniya. The Tijaniya doesn't require, in fact, you can't be a member of other tariqas. And so this is exactly what happened in Sokoto in the late 19th century, is the Tijaniya came along, and it was a route to spiritual and political power for those who could not have it in that existing Qadri hierarchy. What do you do once there's an established Tijaniya hierarchy? Well, you can be Salafi, because the Salafi, dismisses all of this as bid'ah. So this is just one example of these cycles of legitimization and delegitimization, and you have to almost create a new audience and a new discursive tradition for yourself within this, and this is more clear in the concluding part. But it's a cycle, and I showed one cycle of this cycle through the 1804 to 1837, but these cycles are continuing, and they're continuing in of course in Nigeria and in other places today. And then Oliver Coates asks, hi Oliver, can you just...
I was going to add, sorry, Dr. Naylor, you're right about that. I was just going to add to he too. Even before the 40 hour, for example, before the 40 hour, just to talk about the circle, because the circle is one of the focus of my current book project at the moment. So I look at the circle from 1450 to 2015. So I also look at the 40 hour as well. And in the first circle, particularly from 1450 to 1774, the debate was on the issue of whether ilm kalam was wajib on the awam or it wasn't wajib on the awam. That was a major debate. And you could see the debate, for example, in the writings of scholars that circulated at that time, the likes of Muhammad al-Wali Suleiman, the likes of Ibn Salam al-Awjili, Muhammad Yusuf Hassan al-Sinusi, Tarif Roma from Borno, Muhammad al-Ajurmi, Shubuzula. They had all of this debate. And then from 1774 to 1903, that's the 40 hour. The debate around that time was, I mean, it's extended. 40 hour had to respond to some of those issues about whether ilm kalam was wajib or not, and then he came up with this distinction between usuluddin and ilm kalam. And by the time we got to the early independence period, from the colonial period to the early independence period, what actually happened there was when there was this shift from the Maliki Ashari Sufi canon that defined Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah, and there was new ways of defining even Bid'ah, new ways of defining even Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. And Abu Bakr Gumi played a big role in that debate because initially, if you are Ashari in Akida, if you're Maliki Madhab, if you are Sufi, you're Tasawwuf, you're considered Ahlus Sunnah wal Jama'ah. But for the first time, that trichotomy was altered, and then there was a new kind of like discursive tradition. And then when Muhammad Yusuf came on board, Muhammad Yusuf he introduced new ways of defining Tawheed, because in the past, for Tawheed was just defined around, condemning Awthan. If you're not worshiping idols, then you're considered, if you're not worshiping idols, then it is considered, you are considered to be a monotheist, a mu'min. But then Muhammad Yusuf came in and added another discursive tradition that no, for you to believe in Tawheed, you must do kufr bi Taghut. You must disbelieve in Taghut. And for Taghut, for Muhammad Yusuf, is not just idols. Taghut for Muhammad Yusuf became even the rulers who are doing who are ruling by other than. So this circle kept kind of like changing. Just to add to what you said about the circle. Sorry for the interjection.
No, sure. And any errors in my approaches for my book will be surely corrected in Abdul Basit's book, which is going to come out soon, I hope.
Hopefully, I'm working on it.
Yes, so Oliver's question, can you describe the manuscript holdings in Niger? Also, are there surviving holdings in Chad? For Chad, I'm not too sure, but Niger, yes, they have national archives. They have about 4,000, 5,000 Arabic manuscripts. It's part of the University Abdul Moumouni in Niamey, and they have a department of Département des manuscrits arabes et ajami, the Department of Arabic Manuscripts and Ajami manuscripts. And so it's really been it's very interesting. It's been institutionalized. This is a state archive with Arabic manuscripts, and also many photocopies and Xeroxes from other parts of West Africa that were brought to Niger exactly to tell the national story in the same manner as many national archives in Nigeria. So it's good. I mean, the holdings are good there. They have Al Furqan published a catalog. You can see the catalog. I think it's about 4 volumes or something like that. So yeah, that's all out there. Okay, I think that's it.
On the Chad issue, Dr. Colt, you might be interested in the preliminary survey that Andrew Brigaglia conducted for Chad, for the manuscript of Chad. The preliminary survey was published by the Endangered Archive Programs at the British Library. So you might want to look at that. He published a survey on the manuscript of Chad.
Thanks, I didn't know that. Thank you. Yeah, and then we had a useful contribution from LSA about possible publishers. So I'll definitely follow up with that.
Okay.
Okay. Mujit, I think as chair, you can close the session unless we have any other questions. Dr. Mutiat, are you still there? Okay, I was about to do. Okay, great.
Okay, then is that, let me see. No question. Of course, they are thanking you for the response. Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you. I think you can close the session as chair. You're now chair.
Dr. Abdul Basit. Hello?
Yeah, I'm there, Dr. Oladije, I'm there.
Okay, nice to meet you.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
I've heard so much about you. Congratulations on your PhD.
Thank you so much, man.
I think I have to read about you more from Dr. Kwerogi, and then I got to know more about your background and everything, and I find it interesting because it's something rare. It's something rare, and so
Yeah,
thank you very much. Yeah, I like your criticism of the book, and so I appreciate everybody that has been here, the panelists and those that were the attendees that were here with us. I think, let me just go through the list of people there. The attendees, we have Carmen McCain, we have Professor Coates, Oliver Coates, Semiu Adegbenle, we have Tosi Orimolade. I think earlier on, Dr. Morenikeja Ashwaju from Ashaju from University of Birmingham was also with us. Maybe she has logged out. And so I appreciate everyone for coming here. And I hope that this knowledge will continue to live with us. So thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you again.
Yeah, thank you so much, Paul. It's so nice seeing you again.
Okay, bye. I have joined you now.
Thank you.
Okay, bye, Dr. Bauer. Nice to meet you. We'll be in touch.
You. Yeah,
okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Yeah.
Bye. LSA, you can take over.